friends, it's Pixie. I'm glad you could join me. I rewatched Over the Garden Wall today, and I love it so much. It's so good. It's that perfect mishmash of like cute and funny, but also spooky and weird, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? But also like giggling, and it's also just so beautiful. Like the entire art style is just, it's great. I love it so much. And you should all watch it. But while watching, I thought, how fun would it be to do book recommendations based on every episode? Oops, that was some books falling. It's fine, don't worry about it. So, I have 10 books from my shelves, one for every episode, and they are adult books, because kids shows aren't just for kids. They're also for geeky adults like myself. So, just so you know. So, the first episode, this is gonna be spoiler free, by the way. If you haven't seen Over the Garden Wall, there won't be any spoilers. There will just be like slight hints to various things that happen, but no spoilies. The first episode that kicks everything off is called The Old Grist Mill. And for this one, I decided to go with one of the first books I thought of for a similar vibe to the show as a whole. And that is Tove Jansson, Comet in Moominland. This was originally written in Swedish, and I've only read it in Swedish, obviously, because I am Swedish. So I had to look up the English title. It's Comet in Moominland. And if you've never read Moomin, it's always a good time to start. They are absolutely wonderful, and they hold up even if you're not a child. They are so well done. So what this one is about, well, let me tell you. A depressed rat. He's not a rat. I don't know the English word for this. A depressed rodent shows up to Moomin Valley and is like, I have this book that says everything is terrible, and there's a comet coming, and everyone is like, oh my god. And they go on an adventure quest through spooky woods, and weird things happen, and it's wonderful. And it also straddles that line between like cute and spooky. It's not spooky in the way that you're like genuinely scared, but it just has that atmosphere to it. I really hope that makes sense to someone who isn't me. I know what I mean. But yeah, Moomin in general, very, very good. For episode number 2, Hard Times at the Huskin Bee, I have for you The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. And this also has, I feel, similar vibes to Over the Garden Wall as a whole. It's told from the perspective of a child, but it is very much an adult book. And just weird things go on. There's magic and there's a murder, I think. It wasn't long ago that I read this. Well, there's a dead man, at least. It might have been a suicide, actually. So, this one. And for episode number 3, Schooltown Follies, is where we get into where I go more wild style with the recommendations. So in that episode, a question of identity comes up. And we're in a school, so for this one I chose Girl Man's Up by M.E. Girard. This is about a teenage butch lesbian where people are like, you dress like a boy, do you want to be a boy? And she's like, no, I'm a girl, I'm just like this. And I gave this 5 stars out of 5. I thought it was excellent. It's a coming of age story in a way that I didn't find it repetitive, which sometimes YA contemporary can be to me. Like, I had a period where I read a lot of YA contemporary because I just wanted to read about queer characters, and it gets to be kind of samey after a while, and this book really stood out to me and stands out in my memory because Pen, which is the main character's name, is a really special character who I really loved, and yeah, really good book, Girl Man's Up. Episode 4, Songs of the Dark Lantern. For this one, a perhaps surprising book that I thought has Over the Garden Wall vibes. The poems of Dorothy Parker. So the reason I think this is that Dorothy Parker is she's funny. She's making fun of everything all the time, most of all herself. But there's also darkness there. And that's kind of what Over the Garden Wall is like. Like, it is cute and sometimes funny and sometimes a bit spooky. But if you peel back a layer, I feel like there's existential stuff going on. So that's why I think Dorothy Parker's poetry specifically, this big chunky boy has like all her short stories and a bunch of reviews she's written and a lot of stuff, but I would recommend reading her poetry first and foremost if you're interested. I think she's really, really just fun. Episode 5, Mad Love, takes some tropes from Gothic fiction and makes a lot of fun of them. And you know who else does that? Jane Austen in Northanger Abbey. So this book is essentially about a girl who's like, I must make my life like the novels I read. And she's kind of looking for signs of ghosts and stuff like that. It's a really enjoyable and fun book, and it's very similar to this episode. So I don't think I need to say more about that. It's pretty straightforward. Just parody of Gothic fiction, which is especially fun if you have read Gothic fiction and know stuff about it, but even if you haven't, when I read Northanger Abbey twice, and the first time I didn't know anything about it, and I still thought it was a fun and good book. But then I read it again as part of a class in the female Gothic, and I had a new appreciation for it because I knew more. But yeah, anyway, let's move on. So episode 6, Lullaby in Frogland, we are on a ferry, and therefore I chose The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. And another reason I chose this is because in the show, Over the Garden Wall, there are talking animals, and especially the younger brother, Greg, talks to a frog that he carries with him all the time. And One of the things I liked the most in this book was when the old man talked to the giant fish that's pulling him around. It's a very short book. It's short and sweet, and I don't know, I thought it was really charming and really sweet. Episode 7 is called The Ringing of the Bell, and in that episode, things aren't what they seem. And so for that, I have got Oscar Wilde's short fiction here. And I especially would recommend The Nightingale and the Rose, which is one of my favorite short stories of his. But a lot of them are really good fun and just beautiful tales. And I feel like his short stories aren't as known as Dorian Gray and His Place, which are brilliant and deserve the hype, I think. But the short fiction has some gems for you to unearth, if you so desire. So, for episode 8, Babes in the Wood, I have got Storm Season. I picked this out on my bookshelf because there's a storm in that episode, but then I realized that in this book we have 2 babes in the woods. So this is a lesbian romance. It's about a music journalist. She falls down somewhere. She's out in the forest and she falls down, and a ranger rescues her and takes her to her cabin, and there's a storm, so she has to stay with this ranger in the cabin. So it's like the stuck together trope, which was really wonderfully done. And that's not the whole book, but it progresses from there. And it was a really enjoyable romance. I should say that it's sexually explicit, so now you know. I thought it was good. I gave it 5 stars. The explicit parts were also very good. Okay. For episode 9, Into the Unknown, a mixtape plays a part. So I picked from my shelf Love is a Mixtape by Rob Sheffield, which was my absolute favorite book when I was 18. Rob Sheffield is a music journalist, and it's his life. It's about his wife, Renee, who passed away, and his memories of her connected to a number of different mixtapes. And it's really beautiful and really sweet and sort of life affirming, but also obviously sad. So yeah, it's about love and grief and life. And if that sounds like something you're into, I would really recommend it. Disclaimer, I haven't read it in 10 years, but I still have a lot of memories of it because I read it a few times back then. So it's based on how much I loved it then, essentially. Now, we have arrived at episode 10, The Unknown. So that's a bit of a weird one, but I decided to go with a weird book. And I have Mr. Fox by Helen Oyeyemi. So it says on the back that this book is about Mary Fox, who's not a real person. She's the muse of an asshole novelist whose name is John Fox. And his muse is sick of his shit, essentially. Is what the blurb says. But there's also just a lot of other stuff going on in this book. And I mean, I didn't always know what was going on when I read this. It's one of those books that I need to reread that I haven't gotten around to, because there are also so many new books to read, you know what I mean? But I did know that I enjoyed it, so I still am recommending it. But yeah, The Unknown. I read in an interview with Oyeyemi that she thought this was going to be her last book, so she put like all of the things that she wanted to write in it, because she was like, well, this is it. This has got to get in there, which makes sense when you read it. That played a part in how she wrote it. But yeah, that was 10 books based on Over the Garden Wall episodes. Also, there is Over the Garden Wall comics, which you should absolutely read if you liked Over the Garden Wall. I read them on Scribd. They are on there. I assume you could also buy them somewhere. I don't know. But just so you know, they exist. And I thought I had to mention that. Let me know if any of these recs made sense to you. Let me know if you have read these books and what you thought of them. And also let me know if you're excited for spooky season, because I'm very excited for spooky season. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. It was really fun for me. I hope it was fun for you too. Let me know if it was.